abandoned in the storm. The baby's cries pierced the cabin walls like splinters of glass. They were soft at first, the gentle fussing of a newborn who wanted warmth and milk, but to William they might as well have been thunder. He slammed the mug of coffee down so hard that the cup cracked at the rim. "Can't you shut her up?" he snapped, glaring across the room. Mary flinched, rocking her infant daughter against her chest. The little girl's cheeks were red from the cold, her tiny fists trembling as she whimpered. Mary tried to hush her, pressing her lips to the downy hair and swaying on unsteady feet. "She's just hungry," Mary whispered, her voice thin from exhaustion. "I'll feed her again." But William was already grabbing his coat. He yanked it from the peg, shoulders stiff, jaw set with the same bitterness that had been growing since the birth. "I didn't sign up for this," he muttered. "A squalling brat and a wife too weak to do anything about it." Mary's throat closed. She wanted to beg him, plead with him to stay, to give her one chance to show him they could be a family. But the words stuck. All she managed was a broken, "Please." He didn't look back. The door slammed open, a rush of icy wind scattering the last warmth from the fire. His boots crunched against the snow, fading into the night until there was nothing but silence. Silence, except for the baby. Mary sank onto the edge of the bed, her tears sliding soundlessly down her face. She pressed her cheek to her daughter's soft skin, drawing strength from the tiny life in her arms. She couldn't fall apart now. Not with winter pressing in and no one left to turn to. The hours crawled by. She kept the fire alive with the last of the wood, rocking the baby through the night. Outside, the storm gathered, the kind of prairie storm that swallowed sound and sight alike, piling snow against cabin walls and choking chimneys. By dawn, the cabin was near frozen. Mary's fingers were stiff, her lips pale. She wrapped the baby in her shawl, tucking her close, and whispered, "We'll be all right, little one. Mama won't leave you." But she didn't know how true that could be. The knock on the door came just before noon. Not a brisk rap, but a heavy, deliberate thud that sent her heart racing. She clutched her baby tighter. Who could be out in weather like this? The door creaked open before she could answer. A tall figure stepped inside, snow dusting his hat, his coat, and the dark stubble on his jaw. He didn't speak. Mary recognized him at once. Silas Hart, the quiet rancher from across the valley. A man who rarely came into town, who spoke to no one unless pressed. She'd heard the whispers, widowed, they said, with a heart as closed as the gates to his ranch. He looked at her now, his eyes moving from the weak fire to the baby in her arms. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, without a word, he set down a bundle of wood by the hearth. Mary blinked. I don't have money to pay you," she stammered, shame burning her cheeks. Silas shrugged one shoulder, crouched, and began stacking the wood. His movements were quiet, practiced. Soon the fire was roaring again, warmth rushing back into the little room. Mary's baby stirred, blinking up at the newcomer with wide, curious eyes. Silas's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. He reached out a hand, rough from work and weather, but stopped just short of touching. "She's hungry," Mary whispered, rocking her child again. She realized she was speaking just to fill the silence. "And I don't know what to do now. My husband—" Her voice cracked. Silas stood, towering above her, and for a moment she thought he might leave without a word. Instead, he nodded once, firm, as though making a decision. Then he turned and opened the door. Cold wind rushed in again. Mary's heart sank. "Wait!" she called, desperation clawing her throat. But he wasn't leaving. Minutes later, he returned with a sack, flour, beans, dried meat, and even a jar of milk wrapped in cloth to keep from freezing. He set it down on the table, then tipped his hat, preparing to go. Mary couldn't hold back the tears this time. "Why?" she whispered. For the first time, Silas's eyes met hers fully. He still didn't speak, but something passed in his gaze, something steady, unshakable, like a man who had known loss and wasn't about to let someone else drown in it. Then, with the same quiet weight he carried everywhere, he said his first word of the day. "Stay." Mary didn't understand. "Stay." Silas gestured, slow and deliberate, toward his own ranch beyond the valley. Her heart pounded. The baby whimpered in her arms, tiny fists clenching. She thought of the empty nights ahead, of hunger and cold, of a husband who had chosen to walk away. And then she thought of this man, silent, yes, but strong. A man whose silence wasn't cruelty, but protection. Mary swallowed hard. "If you'll have us." Silas gave a single, steady nod. And just like that, the storm outside no longer seemed so unbearable. A name given, a home found. The valley lay under a thick quilt of snow when Mary crossed it with Silas. She clutched her baby close, following his steady steps as he broke the path with deliberate care. He didn't offer words, but he glanced back often, making sure she wasn't too far behind. His ranch stood at the edge of the foothills, larger than she had imagined, with a long barn and a cabin built sturdy against the wind. Smoke curled from its chimney, promising warmth she had not known in days. Inside, the air smelled of pine and bread, simple, strong things. Silas set down her meager bundle of belongings by the hearth, then stoked the fire until it glowed. Mary lowered herself into a chair, baby nestled at her breast, and let the warmth seep into her bones. For the first time since William had left, she breathed without fear. Silas moved quietly, as though sound itself might break the fragile peace. He set bread on the table, poured water into a cup, and left it where she could reach. He did not sit. Instead, he busied himself with the fire, the shelves, the tools by the door. A man who knew how to fill silence with purpose. Mary studied him when he wasn't looking. Broad shoulders, hands hardened by years of labor, eyes shadowed by something deeper than simple solitude. She had heard the whispers in town, how his wife had died, how he had shut himself away, refusing all company. Now, watching the careful way he glanced at her child, she began to understand. That night, when the baby fussed, Silas was there before she could rise. He lifted more wood onto the fire, adjusting the kettle so steam warmed the room. He didn't touch the child, but his presence was steady, a quiet wall between her and the cold world outside. Days turned to weeks. Snowstorms came and went. Mary learned the rhythm of the ranch, the creak of the barn door in the morning, the way Silas never wasted a step, the silence that wasn't empty but full of unspoken strength. And slowly, something began to change. One morning, as she fed her daughter by the fire, Silas returned from the barn with a small bundle wrapped in cloth. He set it on the table and stepped back. Mary frowned. "What's this?" She unfolded the cloth to find a tiny knitted cap and blanket. Worn, but carefully mended. The stitches spoke of love long past. Her chest tightened. "These belonged to—" Silas gave a single nod. His eyes flickered, and for the first time she saw not silence, but grief. Mary swallowed hard. "Thank you," she whispered. She wrapped her baby in the blanket, and the child cooed, tugging at the loose yarn. Silas watched, a faint softening in his jaw, before he turned away. The ranch no longer felt like borrowed shelter. It was becoming something else. A place of belonging. But belonging is fragile. It was early spring when William returned. Mary was out in the yard, hanging laundry in the pale sun, when she saw the horse crest the ridge. Her heart lurched. She recognized his posture at once, the tilt of his shoulders, the arrogance in his gaze. William dismounted roughly, boots crunching on the thawing ground. His eyes swept over her, then to the cabin, then to the child swaddled in her arms. "You look well enough," he said coldly. "Didn't expect you to manage." His gaze darkened. "I've come for what's mine." Mary's stomach knotted. She held her baby closer. "You left us." William sneered. "I changed my mind." Before she could answer, the cabin door opened. Silas stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to turn the air heavy. William narrowed his eyes. "So this is how it is. You've taken up with the mute rancher." He barked a laugh. "She ain't yours. Neither is that child." Silas dropped the rag and stepped forward. He said nothing, but his stance was a wall. His eyes, cold as river stone, never wavered. Mary's pulse thundered. She had never seen Silas raise his voice, never seen him lift a hand in anger. But now, facing her husband, he radiated something unshakable, like the mountain itself had risen to shield her. William's smirk faltered. He spat in the dirt, swung back into his saddle, and snarled, "You'll regret this. Both of you." Then he wheeled his horse and rode off, a dark figure against the melting snow. Mary sagged against the laundry line, trembling. Silas crossed the yard, stopping before her. He looked down at the baby in her arms, then at Mary herself. His jaw tightened, and he spoke, low, steady, each word deliberate. "She's mine." Mary blinked. "What?" He lifted his gaze to hers, unwavering. "Both of you." Tears blurred her vision. No man had ever claimed her like that, not as property, not as burden, but as family, as his own. Silas reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. He handed it to her. With shaking hands, she opened it. It was a marriage license, signed and sealed, her name written beside his in careful ink. He must have gone to town, quietly, without telling her. Mary pressed her hand to her mouth. "You gave us your name." Silas's voice dropped to a whisper. "Family." Her tears spilled freely now. She leaned against him, baby between them, and for the first time since her daughter's first cry, she felt whole. From that day forward, no one in the valley doubted. Mary Hart, the townsfolk said. The baby, Sarah Hart. And Silas, the quiet rancher who had once been alone, was no longer silent, for his actions spoke louder than any words ever could. The cries that had driven one man away had bound another to them forever. And in that bond they found a home.